quoted Hansen's paper of 1988, the models at that time didn't even have the Earth rotating. More to the point, Hansen himself retracted that in a paper in 2000 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in America. So anybody in this room can Google that paper for themselves. June 2000, James Hansen, Alternative Models and whatever. He said that all the warming to date, that was to 2000, by carbon dioxide had been countered by cooling from aerosols. Now, I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying that this bears to consensus, this bears to accuracy of models, and you can Google it for yourself.
Yes,
well, I think Stefan's about to do that. Kevin?
This graph that showed that this model from 20 years ago accurately predicted what happened over the 20 years. Jim Hansen would be the first person to tell you that those models from 20 years ago were not very good models. The models we have now are much better. You can actually see this. Anyone who's over than 30 years old will know that the weather forecasts that we had 20 years ago were nowhere near as good as the weather forecasts we have now.
Correct.
A great deal of the increase in the accuracy of weather forecasts and climate forecast models is the increase in the power of computers. Over the 20 years, the power of computers is now 20,000 times more better. What's more, our ability to include things in the model, like the rotation of the Earth, but a whole lot of other things as well. The various types of greenhouse gases, the influence of dust, the influence of aerosols and sulfates, and many other things are in those models. There are independent ways of testing models to ensure that the details that are put in there are accurately represented. And we have tested those, and we are sure that the models that we have now accurately predict what is going to happen.
I'm sorry, you missed the point. Hansen himself.
No, I said that Jim Hansen would be one of the first people to point out the problems with that 20-year-old model. But the models we have now are much better. My point was that this model, even though it was not entirely accurate, still managed to produce accurate forecasts of what happened over the last 20 years. That is the whole goal of science. That is the holy grail of science, is to predict something before it actually happens. The fact that we can make better models now just means that we have even more confidence than we could have had 20 years ago.
Do any of the other panellists want to comment on that now?
One comment. I mean, basically, it's more recent model I showed in 2005. I think one of the points he was making is that from about the 1980s, 1990s, particularly, that the CO2 force is now starting to be clearly coming out of the, if you like, the noise and the natural variability that's there. And it alone is now, well, not alone, but it's very clear to see the temperature rise now being predominantly driven by CO2, beyond all the levels of this other noise, e.g. volcanism and other sorts of aerosol forces. And that, of course, the CO2 signal is going to get stronger and stronger as time goes on. And so it's already out of the noise of the natural variability. Around about 20 years ago, it's probably back around 1980, 70, somewhere around there. Because of course the natural variability. So that's, I think that's one interpretation of the point that he was making. Not that his model was wrong, but that now we can clearly see the CO2 forcing above the very natural variability background signal.
And this is Hansen's 2000 paper where he says that carbon dioxide is one of the major drivers of climate. So I think that settles the issue.
So where's your quote?
Well, there it was. And he says carbon dioxide is one of the main drivers of climate. So,
We've lost it now.
Just bring up the title of his paper.
Just a moment, we'll see if there are other questions before we go further on. Gentlemen,
yes, thank
here?
you.
Yes.
I think a reference, a throwaway line is that CO2, the amount of CO2 being produced is increasing. What quantity of that is due to the thawing of the permafrost?
Well, that's actually...
We all know about China, but
yeah,
there
that's probably more equivalent. That's when we're talking about equivalence. That would be the methane component, which has a common also a force, which is actually per ppm much larger than the CO2.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not sure what you know what proportion of methane. It's about 10% of the reporting. What methane?
Yeah. Yeah, I think methane's about a third of the CO2 reporting, or maybe slightly less than that. But methane levels have also been fairly level since about, I think, 98 or so. Just the last couple of years it's started to rise.
Now, what proportion? I don't know. The question which comes when the permafrost is sort of a potential large source.
Sure.
It's a very serious concern. What proportion is coming from them at the moment? I don't think that number is
From a psychological point of view, do you have any insights into why people tend to barrack for one side or the other in the face of not being experts themselves? On the AGW side, and other people barrack on the other side. Why?
Do you want me to?
I think
step
yours.
Okay. Well, there's quite a bit of data out there on that, and one of the strong predictors about attitude towards climate change is one's cultural worldview or ideology. And there's a number of ways in which you can sort of characterize people's ideology, for lack of a better term. And what we find is there's a study by Gifford and Heath, which found a very strong correlation with people's belief in the free market and their inability to set science. The correlation is about 0.47. So it's a very strong predictor that, again, for lack of a better term, free marketeers tend to reject the science. And there's a lot of evidence for that, that is what is driving people's attitudes. What's also interesting in this context is that depending on how you frame the problem, you get very different responses from the same people. So, for example, if you present global warming as a problem that has to be dealt with by emission cuts, then a lot of people find that very difficult to accept. If the same scientific information is presented with a framing as nuclear power being the solution and a market opportunity for the nuclear industry, then the very same people will endorse that and find that very attractive all of a sudden. So a lot of this depends on the framing, and what appears to be very important is the attitude towards free markets. And there are other ways to carve up people's individual differences, but this is the one that sticks out.
I would just like to add that the discussion in Australia about whether climate science is real or not, it's something that's unheard of in Germany.
That's right.
There is from the far left to the far right, even the free market parties we have, there is no discussion about whether climate change is happening.
That's right.
It's a fact, and this is accepted by across party lines and across of course there's discussion about details, we say that in this report, but there is no discussion about climate change.
Do any of the other panellists want to comment at this stage on the community attitudes toward it from their own research and experience?
Yeah, well, I
Nicole?
guess they're, it's understandable in some sense. It's wonderful to be in Germany. There isn't that problem, but climate change does present such an incredible challenge to us, and also something that's quite difficult to get your head around if you perceive the impacts to be into the future. We perceive the solutions as having a substantial impact on the whole way in which we conduct our society. And so it's really probably not surprising that there is a sort of automatic sense of denial. And I think many of us, even those of us who are actively working in the area, struggle also to really comprehend what action it will require and what we can do to take serious action. So I think we probably have to be understanding of people's ability to really come to grips with that.
Any further questions? Gentlemen,
I'd like to just prosecute this point about the climate models one more time. You made the point fairly strongly that Hansen's forecast from 1988 accurately reflects what's happening. I'm wondering if one of you chaps can just bring up that graph again, because I'd like you to comment on this a little further. So Hansen has described three scenarios here, and